So you are probably making more money right now than your parents did at your exact age.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if we look at the raw statistics, mathematically speaking, your generation is the richest in American history.
Right, on paper.
On paper, yeah. So why do you feel like you are barely keeping your head above water?
Well, it is the defining economic mystery of August 2026.
It really is.
Because if you look at the macro data, I mean, the economy is basically a rocket ship.
Yeah.
But if you look at the kitchen table math for the average person, it feels like a completely different universe.
Exactly. And I want you to picture the economy as this, like, split screen right now.
Okay, I like that visual.
Yeah, so on the left side, you have the macro level indicators flashing bright, blinding green. I mean, the stock market is setting new all-time highs on what feels like a weekly basis at this point.
Oh, completely.
And the Bureau of Economic Analysis just reported that current dollar GDP grew by a massive 7.9% in the second quarter.
Which is huge.
It's staggering. And the major artificial intelligence firms are suddenly commanding trillion-dollar valuations. So it is this portrait of undeniable, overwhelming American prosperity.
Yeah, by every traditional textbook measurement we have relied on for the last century, it is an absolute boom.
Right. But then you look at the right side of the split screen.
A reality check.
The reality check, exactly. That's where you are sitting. You are, say, a 30-something wage earner looking at a median monthly rent bill that has crossed $1,400.
Yeah.
You are staring at a grocery receipt that somehow doubled over the last few years.
It's painful.
It really is. The macroeconomy is doing objectively, historically well, while your household budget feels, well, profoundly stretched. And that glaring contradiction is the core mission of our deep dive today.
Because we really need to figure out exactly what is breaking that historical link between a booming national economy and your personal financial security.
Exactly. So we are going to unpack a very specific structural question.
Which is what?
Is America increasingly becoming an economy that rewards people who already own assets drastically more than it rewards people who primarily earn wages?
That is the big question.
It is. And to figure this out, we are not going to rely on vibes or, financial Twitter.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, we are going straight to the raw data. I've spent the last week digging through a stack of brand new 2026 reports.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
We do. We've got numbers from the Federal Reserve, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Congressional Budget Office, and the SEC.
And our promise to you, the listener, is that we are going to translate all of those dense government spreadsheets into your actual reality.
Plain English.
Right, plain English. We're going to break down the mechanics behind the data. We want to connect the dots between national productivity and your retirement account,
Yes.
between GDP growth and your monthly rent.
So let's start with the reality of your paycheck. Because, to understand the asset economy, we really first have to understand the wage economy.
Makes sense. Where are we starting?
I was looking at the latest income and inflation data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So in June 2026, average weekly earnings hit $1,291.05.
Okay.
That is up 3.8% from the previous year. And if you just stop reading there, that sounds like a victory. Wages are climbing.
Well, they are climbing in nominal terms, yes.
Yeah.
3.8% bump is solid.
Yeah.
But we really need to unpack what nominal actually means.
Right, because it's a bit of an illusion.
It is. It's a trap that catches a lot of people when they look at economic data. Nominal simply means the raw number printed on your paycheck is physically larger than it was last year.
Okay.
But it tells you absolutely nothing about what that number can actually buy at the store.
Right, the purchasing power.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the other side of that BLS report, right? The Consumer Price Index, which tracks inflation.
The infamous CPI.
Yeah. So while wages went up 3.8%, the overall CPI went up 3.5% over the last 12 months. So suddenly, that raise isn't looking so hot.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And we have to dig into the methodology of the CPI because it's a basket of goods.
Right. It averages everything out.
Exactly. It averages out everything from used cars to medical care.
Yeah.
But if you look at the specific line items you interact with daily, the picture gets much sharper.
Like what?
For instance, energy prices are up a staggering 15.7% in that same 12-month period.
Wow. So every time you fill up your gas tank or pay your electric bill to keep the air conditioning running, that specific cost is devouring a disproportionate chunk of that 3.8% raise.
Precisely. And this is where we get to the core mechanism of how economists measure your actual wealth. which is real earnings.
Right. Whenever you hear the word real in economics, it means inflation adjusted.
Exactly. So to find your real earnings, you take your nominal wage growth at 3.8%, and you mathematically subtract the inflation rate of the things you have to buy.
Okay, simple enough.
And you also factor in slight fluctuations in the average hours worked per week.
Right.
When the BLS ran that calculation for June 2026, they found that real average hourly earnings only grew by 0.1% year over year.
Wait, 0.1%.
0.1%.
That is completely microscopic.
It really is.
So you negotiated a raise, your paycheck is bigger, and your actual mathematical purchasing power moved forward by a fraction of a penny on the dollar.
Yeah, your purchasing power is effectively frozen in amber. You are working just as hard, maybe harder, but the actual volume of goods and services you can acquire in exchange for your labor hasn't changed at all.
Man, and this data perfectly explains the psychological shift I found in the Federal Reserve's Economic Well-Being Report for 2025.
Oh, that's a fascinating report.
It is. They do this massive survey of U.S. adults every single year, and they found that 73% of adults reported they were either doing okay or living comfortably.
Now, 73% sounds like a pretty solid majority.
It does. But here is the critical context. That number is actually down from 78% in 2021.
Wow. A 5 percentage point drop across the entire adult population of the United States.
It's massive.
Statistically, that is just massive. You are talking about millions of human beings who have slid down the scale from comfortable to just scraping by in the span of 4 years.
And the Fed survey actually asked them why.
What do they say?
The number one financial concern across the board, completely dwarfing everything else, was price increases.
Unsurprising, given that CPI data.
Right. And furthermore, the survey found that the share of workers who actually received a raise dropped to 50%.
Only half.
Yeah, and that is down from 55% during the peak of the Great Resignation just a few years ago.
Right, when everyone was jumping jobs for massive pay bumps.
Exactly. So the raises are cooling off, but the structural inflation is sticking around.
It creates this awful pressure cooker effect.
It does. But, this is where I actually want to push back on the prevailing cultural narrative because the data completely surprised me here.
Really? How so?
Well, if you spend 5 minutes on the internet, the dominant narrative is that younger generations, like Millennials and Gen Z, are fundamentally poorer than their parents were.
Everyone feels like they're making less.
Exactly. Everyone says it. But I pulled up a recent Federal Reserve paper on intergenerational progress, and the math says the exact opposite.
Oh, I know this paper. It is one of the most misunderstood data points in modern economics.
It blew my mind. The Fed tracked inflation-adjusted income across 5 generations, and they found that millennials, when measured at ages 36 to 40, have a real median household income that is 18% higher than Generation X had at that exact same age.
18% higher. And remember, that is real income.
Right.
That already factors in the inflation we were just talking about.
It does, and it goes even further. The paper noted that if you hold work hours constant to account for the fact that you might have more dual-income households now, or people working different schedules, millennials and Gen X experienced a greater intergenerational increase in market income than the baby boomers did.
That's wild to think about.
Right, so purely in terms of wage earning power, millennials are technically the richest generation in American history at this stage of their lives.
Which really forces us to reconcile two completely conflicting realities.
Yeah.
How can you be the richest generation in history on paper, while millions of people are simultaneously telling the Federal Reserve they're losing their financial footing?
Right, and I think the answer lies in understanding the mechanics of expenses versus wages.
Break that down for us.
So the cost of basic survival, the absolute non-negotiables like shelter, food, and energy, well, it doesn't care about your nominal raise.
No, it doesn't.
Let's use an analogy to break down the physics of what's happening to your budget.
Okay, I love a good analogy.
Imagine you are on a treadmill at the gym.
All right.
Earning a higher nominal wage today is like running faster on that treadmill. You look down at the digital display and you are hitting a new personal best. You are running at, say, 8 miles an hour.
You are putting in more effort, and the machine is telling you that you are going faster. You feel good.
Exactly. But unfortunately, inflation and a cost of living dictate the actual speed of the treadmill belt beneath your feet.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Yeah. And the gym management just cranked the belt speed up to 8 miles an hour at the exact same time you accelerated.
So you are sweating more, your heart rate is totally maxed out, your digital display says you are flying, but you were completely stationary.
Exactly. Your budget is incredibly fragile because all of that extra effort is being perfectly absorbed by the increased cost of the belt moving backward.
And that treadmill mechanism is exactly what the Fed report captured.
Oh, did they actually ask about that?
Yeah, they found that 32% of adults said their monthly income increased over the past year,
Okay.
but 35% said their monthly spending increased.
Wow. So expenses are literally outpacing the raises.
Yes, it does not matter how high your salary goes if your fixed costs are rising at a faster velocity. You feel impoverished because your discretionary margin, the money left over after you simply survive the month, is shrinking.
Right. Which brings us to the breaking point of the wage economy. I mean, earning a good, steady wage used to be the finish line for the American dream.
You get the job, you get the salary, you are set.
Exactly. But if higher real wages aren't making you feel wealthier, we have to look at what wages are actually used for.
Right.
Because you don't just earn wages to buy groceries, you earn wages to buy assets.
And this is where the transition from a wage earner to an asset owner becomes critical.
Why is that?
Because if your wages are constantly being devoured by the treadmill of basic expenses, you can never accumulate the capital required to buy the things that actually build wealth.
Oh, that makes total sense. And if we are talking about assets in America, we have to start with the bouncer at the door of the asset club.
The biggest one of all.
They have to talk about housing.
Housing is where the divide between the two economies becomes structural and, honestly, permanent.
Yeah. Let's look at the Census Bureau's American Community Survey and the FHFA House Price Index.
Okay, lay the numbers on us.
The numbers for 2023 are staggering. The median home value in the United States reached $340,000.
$340,000.
Yeah, and that is just the median. If you look at the 75th percentile, which generally represents nicer homes or standard homes in major metropolitan areas where the highest paying jobs are located, that value hits $568,500.
Over $500,000.
Right. And yet, if you look at the overall homeownership rate, it sits at 65.2%.
Which honestly sounds incredibly healthy.
It does. Nearly two-thirds of the country owns a home. If I just look at that top line number, I might think the system is working perfectly.
But this is exactly why we can't just trust top-line averages. Averages obscure the distribution.
What do you mean?
We have to break down the massive generational divide hidden inside that 65.2%.
Right. Because when you slice the census data by age, the illusion completely shatters.
Give me the breakdown.
So for householders under 35 years old, the homeownership rate is a mere 36.1%.
Just over a third.
Yeah. But for those 65 and older, it's 78.5%.
That is a massive gap. And we need to explain the mechanics of why that gap exists. And it really comes down to what the census calls the cost-burden ratio.
Okay, let's look at what is happening to the people who are trying to save up to buy those $340,000 homes.
You mean the renters?
Yes, the renters. The census data shows that the median monthly housing cost for renters rose to $1,402 in 2023.
So think about the math of the treadmill again.
Right.
If you are paying over $1,400 a month just for the right to exist indoors, and your real earnings only grew by 0.1%, how exactly do you accumulate a 20% down payment?
You don't. I mean, you are effectively boxed out. Saving $68,000 for a down payment on a median home while paying current rent prices and current grocery prices. It requires a miraculous level of financial discipline or just a massive inheritance.
It really shifts homeownership from a standard milestone of adulthood to a luxury good.
It does, and I want to dive into the mechanism of why homeownership actually matters, because it's not just about having a yard.
No, it's financial.
Completely. Let's trade the treadmill analogy for an escalator.
Okay.
Imagine the American economy is a massive building and wealth is at the top floor.
Right.
If you are a wage earner who rents, you are taking the stairs.
Hmm.
Every step you take is fueled purely by your own physical labor, your salary. You stop working, you stop climbing.
And you are exhausted.
Exactly. But if you own a home, you are stepping onto an escalator. You might still be walking up the steps. I mean, you're still working your job and paying your mortgage, but the machine itself is mechanically pulling you upward at the same time. The asset is doing the work for you.
That escalator is compounding equity.
Yes.
And the Census Bureau quantifies exactly how powerful that machine is. According to their data, home equity accounts for 31.4% of aggregate wealth for households at or below the 99th percentile.
Wow. Over 30% of wealth is just home equity.
Yes. Aside from employer-sponsored retirement accounts, it is the single largest engine of wealth creation in the country.
So let's break down the mechanics of a mortgage, because it fundamentally changes your relationship with inflation.
It does.
If you buy a house with a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, you are essentially locking your housing cost in a time capsule, right?
Yes. Your property taxes and insurance might fluctuate a bit, but the principal and interest payments remain absolutely static for 3 decades.
So as the years go by and inflation pushes the cost of everything else up, your housing cost stays the same. Meanwhile, the value of the house itself is generally inflating along with the rest of the economy.
Right.
The asset is appreciating, but your debt remains fixed. The gap between those two numbers is your wealth.
Which brings us to a fascinating, almost shocking statistic from the Federal Reserve's Well-Being Report.
What did they find?
They found that 39% of adults, 60 or older, who have incomes under $50,000 own their homes free and clear.
Wait, let's really pause on that. 4 out of 10 seniors making less than 50 grand a year have absolutely zero mortgage payments.
Zero. Their income is technically low. By wage earner standards, they are not wealthy,
Right.
but their actual financial stability is incredibly high because their largest fixed cost has been permanently eliminated, and they are sitting on an asset worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Now, let's contrast that senior with the 30-something millennial.
The one on the treadmill.
Exactly. That millennial might be making $90,000 a year. Statistically, they have a higher inflation-adjusted salary than the senior did at age 35.
Right.
But because the price of entry into the housing market has accelerated so violently, that millennial is stuck renting for an extra 10 years. They are handing $1,400 a month to a landlord, capturing zero equity.
They're permanently losing a decade of compounding interest, and time is the one variable in the compounding equation you can never get back.
You just can't.
You cannot simply work twice as hard in your 40s to recapture the lost equity of your 30s. The math doesn't work.
No.
The senior has wealth without high income. The millennial has high income without wealth.
And this perfectly illustrates the divide. You can be highly successful in the wage economy and completely locked out of the asset economy.
It's a paradox.
It is. But housing isn't the only escalator in the building. Right.
No, it's not.
If a 30-something is permanently priced out of the housing market, they still need somewhere to put their leftover cash to build wealth. They have to turn to the stock market.
A corporate economy.
Exactly. So let's investigate the stock market, because if you can't buy a house, you buy shares. But when the average wage earner takes their cash to the stock market, what did they actually find?
Well, they find an environment that is even more stratified than the housing market.
Seriously.
Let's look at the data from the SEC and S&P Global.
Okay.
By mid-2025, the concentration of the market reached historical extremes. Just 10 companies represented almost 40% of the entire S&P 500 index.
Meaning, the vast majority of the stock market's performance is being dictated by a tiny handful of massive, primarily technology-focused corporations.
Yes. But the more important question is who owns those shares?
Right.
The SEC wealth distribution statistics show that 58.1% of U.S. households own stock. That translates to roughly 76 million households as of 2022.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic here, because I look at that exact same SEC data.
Okay, give me.
76 million households is 58% of the country. That is a clear majority.
It is.
If the majority of the working class is participating in the stock market through their 401ks or the Robinhood accounts, doesn't that disprove the idea that the asset economy is an exclusive club? I mean, the wage earners are in the market.
They are in the building, yes. But we have to look at what floor they are on. Now, this is where we have to unpack the critical mathematical difference between the median and the mean in wealth statistics.
It is so easy to get those confused.
It is the most common way economic data gets misinterpreted.
So break down the mechanism for us. How does that math actually work?
Let's line up all 76 million households that own stock.
All right, big line.
Huge line. We put the household with the smallest account balance on the far left, and the household with the largest account balance, the billionaires, on the far right.
Okay.
The median is the household standing exactly in the physical middle of that line. 50% of people have less, 50% have more.
So it's the dead center of the American investor class.
Right. And according to the SEC data, the median value of stock holdings for that middle household is just $52,000.
$50,000. I mean, it's a respectable amount of money, but is certainly not retired to a golf course at 55 money.
Not even close.
Yeah.
But now let's calculate the mean, which is the average.
Right.
To find the mean, you take the total combined value of every single stock owned by every household in America, and you divide it equally by those 76 million households.
Okay, so pooling all the money together and splitting it evenly.
Exactly. The SEC data shows the mean value of stock holdings is $489,490.
Wait, the median is 52,000, but the average is nearly $500,000.
Exactly.
That is insane.
And that massive gaping chasm between the median and the mean tells you exactly how the wealth is distributed.
How so?
It means the average is being dragged violently upward by a very small number of households holding multi-million or multi-billion-dollar portfolios.
Oh, it's the old statistical joke.
Which one?
If you are sitting in a dive bar with 9 of your friends, the average net worth in the room is maybe $40,000.
Right.
But if a billionaire walks into the bar, suddenly the average net worth of everyone in the room is $100 million. The mean shoots up, but the median, the guy sitting in the middle of the bar, is still only worth $40,000.
That is exactly what is happening in the stock market.
Yeah.
And we need to walk through the math of how this impacts the wealth divide year over year.
Let's do it. Let's put this into a real-world scenario. Let's say the macroeconomy has an amazing year. The S&P 500 goes up 20%. The financial news anchors are totally thrilled.
Popping champagne.
Right. If you are that median household and you have your $52,000 invested, that 20% gain just made you roughly $10,400 on paper.
Which is great. That pays off a credit card or funds a modest home repair.
Right, it's helpful. But now let's look at the heavy asset owner. Let's look at the household with a $2 million portfolio.
Okay.
That exact same 20% market increase just made them $400,000 on paper.
And this is the crux of the asset economy. The heavy asset owner just generated $400,000 in wealth simply by existing.
By doing nothing.
Right. They didn't work longer hours. They didn't learn a new skill. The companies they owned shares in became more profitable, and the market rewarded them.
Wow.
They just made more money by holding paper than a typical wage earner makes in 5 years of hard physical labor.
The mechanism of compounding returns at that scale completely divorces wealth creation from human effort.
It does.
I always find it incredibly ironic when the financial channels get overly celebratory about the market. You know, the Dow hit a record high today.
Right.
That is fantastic news, assuming your checking account isn't currently engaged in hand-to-hand combat with your utility bill.
Exact.
If you are one of the 42% of households that own zero stock, or you are the median household with 52 grand that you can't touch without a tax penalty until you are 59 and a half, a 20% market gain means virtually nothing to your daily reality.
The market had a life-changing year entirely without you.
Yeah.
Which forces us to address a structural misunderstanding of economic indicators.
Yeah.
We tend to conflate the stock market with the economy.
Yes. We really need to separate GDP from corporate market capitalization. They are not the same thing.
Explain how you see the difference.
Well, GDP, gross domestic product, is roughly the total value of all the goods and services the country produces.
Right, the actual output.
Yeah. But a company's market capitalization, its stock price, is just a measurement of what investors believe that specific company's future profits will be.
And the mechanisms for boosting those two things are often entirely at odds with each other.
Because a company can boost its future profits without actually producing more goods.
Exactly. Let's trace it out.
Let's say a major corporation figures out how to implement a new software system. It makes their workflow significantly more efficient.
Okay.
As a result, they realize they don't need as many middle managers or clerical staff, so they lay off 10% of their workforce.
Which is brutal for the workers.
Brutal, but their labor costs plummet and their profit margins soar. Wall Street loves this, so the stock price jumps.
The corporate efficiency creates a direct financial windfall for the asset owner holding the stock.
But the wage earner who just got laid off is out of a job, their personal economy just collapsed.
Right.
The exact same event, the implementation of new software, enriched the asset owner and financially ruined the wage earner.
You are describing the fundamental tension between capital and labor.
Yeah.
When capital becomes more efficient, it often does so at the expense of labor. And this brings us to a critical transition point in our deep dive.
Where are we pivoting?
Well, if we look at the data, we know two things for sure right now. The heaviest concentration of wealth is at the top of the stock market, And the stock market is overwhelmingly dominated by a small cluster of tech companies.
Which means we have to talk about what those tech companies are actually building.
We do.
We have to talk about the technology that is driving this massive market concentration, the technology that is actively rewriting the rules of corporate efficiency and threatening to upend the labor market entirely.
We have to talk about the macroeconomic impact of artificial intelligence.
AI is the ultimate wild card in this entire equation.
It really is.
Because the debate right now is whether AI is going to be the solution that saves the wage earner or the massive accelerant that permanently entrenches the asset owner.
And to understand the stakes, we need to look at a major speech given by Federal Reserve Governor Michael Barr in early 2026.
What did he say?
He laid out the Fed's projections for how AI will impact the labor market. He noted that AI could contribute between zero point 0.3 to 0.9 percentage points to annual total factor productivity growth.
Okay, let's unpack total factor productivity so we aren't just throwing jargon around.
Fair enough. Total factor productivity is basically a measurement of how efficiently an economy can turn inputs like capital and labor into output.
So getting more bang for your buck.
Exactly. If total factor productivity goes up, it means we are figuring out how to produce more stuff or better stuff without necessarily having to add more workers or more machines. It's the secret sauce of economic growth.
And an extra 0.3 to 0.9 percentage points is a massive addition to the baseline growth of a mature economy like the United States.
It is huge. The Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, actually ran the math on what that productivity boost would mean for the federal government.
I always saw this.
Yeah, they project that if AI adoption goes exceptionally well, what they call the 95th percentile scenario, where it drives real GDP growth to average 2.6% a year, it could reduce the federal deficit by $1.3 trillion over the next decade.
That is the utopian scenario.
It is.
That is the version of the future where AI makes businesses so radically efficient that the cost of producing goods plummets.
Right.
And in theory, that should lower prices for consumers, stretch everyone's paycheck further, and allow the economy to grow without triggering inflation.
It's the rising tide that lifts all boats.
Yeah, but there's a but, right?
Always. Governor Barr also heavily emphasized a concept called the J-curve of AI adoption. And this is where the short-term reality gets very messy.
Break down the mechanics of the J-curve.
The J-curve is a classic economic model that describes what happens to a company or an entire economy when a major disruptive new technology is introduced.
Okay.
If you draw it on a graph, the line initially dips down deeply before eventually shooting up. It looks exactly like the letter J.
Why does it dip down? If the technology is so great, shouldn't productivity go up immediately?
Because integration is incredibly expensive and highly disruptive.
Ah, the growing pains.
Exactly. In the short term, companies face massive capital costs. They have to buy expensive enterprise software licenses, upgrade their cloud server capacity, and hire highly paid consultants to implement the system.
And they have to train people.
More importantly, yes, they have to retrain their staff. While workers are spending 20 hours a week learning how to prompt a new generative AI interface, they are not doing their actual jobs.
So productivity actually falls in the short term. The balance sheet looks worse and the output drops.
Exactly. It is a painful adjustment period.
So when does it go up?
It is only later, months or years down the line, when the technology is fully baked into the daily workflow, when one worker can suddenly do the job of 5, that the curve bottoms out and shoots aggressively upward into long-term productivity gains.
And according to the Fed's data, we're in the messy middle of that J-curve right now.
We are.
The Well-Being Report noted that 25% of workers had already used generative AI in the prior month. But the critical question Governor Barr raised is who is actually benefiting from this integration?
That is the trillion-dollar question that will define the next decade of the American economy.
When that J-curve finally shoots upward, who captures the value?
Well, Barr points out that AI could push the labor market in one of two directions.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, it could act as an equalizer. It could narrow productivity gaps by acting as a digital assistant for lower-skilled workers, helping them catch up to higher-skilled workers.
Imagine a junior copywriter using AI to suddenly produce the volume and quality of a senior copywriter. The junior worker becomes more valuable.
Right. But the second possibility is that AI widens the gap.
And the current data is pointing concerningly in that direction.
It is. The Fed found that generative AI is currently much more commonly used by younger, highly educated, and high-income individuals.
So the people who are already at the top of the wage economy are using the tool to accelerate even further ahead of everyone else.
Yes. If high earners are better positioned to leverage the technology, Wage inequality will only become more extreme.
Wow.
But we can't just look at the workers.
Mm.
We have to look at the capital required to build the machines.
Right, because this stuff isn't free.
No. Governor Barr noted a staggering estimate. Integrating AI across the broader economy will require an estimated $1 trillion in new corporate debt over a 5-year period.
$1 trillion in new debt. Let's walk through the mechanics of what $1 trillion in debt does to corporate behavior.
It changes everything.
Because this is where the asset owner versus wage earner dynamic reaches its peak. If major corporations are borrowing $1 trillion to buy servers and software, they have to pay interest on that debt.
And their shareholders are going to demand a massive tangible return on that investment.
Right. They expect the J-curve to pay off. How do they ensure it pays off?
By ruthlessly pursuing efficiency.
And as we discussed earlier, efficiency is often just polite corporate jargon for reducing labor costs.
Unfortunately, yes.
Let's trace the causality here. Imagine a Fortune 500 company borrows $50 million to integrate a cutting-edge enterprise AI system.
Okay.
The J-curve dips. They take the hit, but eventually the system works. It perfectly automates scheduling, basic data analysis, and mid-level client communications.
The algorithm is now performing the tasks.
Right. So the company looks at its balance sheet, realizes it needs to service that $50 million in debt, and determines it can safely eliminate 30% of its administrative workforce.
Ouch.
They execute the layoffs. The company's payroll drops by tens of millions of dollars a year. Their profit margins explode.
And Wall Street sees the massive boost in profitability, and the stock price surges 15% in a week.
Exactly. Now look at the fallout of that exact sequence of events through the lens of our two economies.
Right, let's break it down.
For the laid-off wage earners, their personal economy has been devastated. They have lost their primary mechanism for survival.
They might eventually find new jobs, but they are facing immediate, severe financial hardship, and they may have to accept lower pay in a market flooded with other displaced administrative workers.
But what about the asset owner? What about the household holding a massive portfolio of that company's stock?
They just saw their net worth jump by 15%.
And they did absolutely nothing to earn it.
That is the terrifying beauty of the asset economy. The asset owner didn't learn a new skill. They didn't work longer hours. The machine did the work.
Yeah.
But because the asset owner owns the capital, because their name is on the shares, the financial gains of that machine's labor flow directly and exclusively to them.
This is exactly why AI has the potential to be a massive accelerant for the asset-owning class.
It really does.
If AI successfully makes the American economy dramatically richer by replacing or hypercharging human labor, the defining factor of your wealth will no longer be how hard you can physically or mentally work.
No, the defining factor will be whether you own a piece of the code, the servers, or the corporations deploying them.
Which brings us crashing back into reality when you remember the SEC data we unpacked earlier.
The median stock portfolio.
Right. It is only $52,000. And over 40% of the country owns absolutely no stock at all.
So if the massive productivity gains projected by the CBO flow primarily to corporate bottom lines, and stock ownership remains heavily concentrated at the very top.
The divide between the wage earner and the asset owner will transition from a gap into a permanent, unbridgeable chasm.
It perfectly synthesizes all the disparate data points we've looked at today.
It does.
We started by looking at the contradiction of August 2026, GDP is growing by 7.9%, the stock market is setting records, yet the average person feels incredibly anxious about their finances.
We wanted to know if America is increasingly rewarding people who already own assets over people who primarily earn wages. And we went through the math.
We looked at the BLS data showing real hourly earnings growing by a microscopic 0.1% while energy costs spiked.
We looked at the treadmill of expenses outstripping the 18% real income gains of millennials.
And we examined the census data, revealing the $1,400 median rent, creating an insurmountable barrier to the compounding equity of the housing market.
Leaving a generation trapped on the stairs while asset owners ride the escalator.
Exactly.
And we looked at the massive concentration of wealth in the stock market, where a 20% gain means a helpful $10,000 for the median household, but a life-changing $400,000 for the heavy asset owner.
Running faster on the wage treadmill simply does not work if the cost of assets is accelerating away from you at a geometric rate.
The data paints a clear, undeniable picture. We are witnessing a fundamental structural shift in the mechanics of the American dream.
We really are. Historically, earning a good income was the finish line. Today, a good income is nearly the prerequisite, the entry fee required just to attempt to buy your way into the asset class.
Which leads us to the final concept, the overarching reality we have uncovered in this deep dive.
Lay it on us.
America doesn't have one single economy anymore. It increasingly contains two overlapping yet entirely distinct economies that operate by different sets of physical laws.
Go.
There is the economy you work in, and there is the economy you own.
If you only participate in the economy you work in, your reality is defined by inflation, frozen purchasing power, the constant struggle to cover fixed costs, and the looming threat of technological displacement.
Right. But if you participate in the economy you own, your reality is defined by compounding equity, record stock market highs, and technological productivity gains flowing directly to your bottom line.
It's two completely different worlds.
It is. And we want to leave you with a lingering, provocative thought to mull over on your own this week.
Something to really think about.
We have seen the projections. Technological leaps like artificial intelligence mean that America, as a nation, will likely keep getting richer and more productive. But if the traditional historical link between human labor and wealth creation is broken, meaning you absolutely must own a piece of that growth, to actually feel its benefits, who exactly are our traditional economic measurements like GDP actually working for?
Because if the algorithm does the work, and the shareholder takes the profit, what is the future of the wage earner?
Look back at that split-screen television we started with. The confetti and the fireworks on the financial channels on the left and you staring at a grocery bill on the right.
Yeah.
The economy is doing great. But the question you have to ask yourself now is, which economy?